is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi everybody, welcome to ODAT Chat. My name is Arlena and I'll be your host. If you haven't yet, you can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher, or you can join the Facebook community with the same name, or visit the website at odatchat.com. This is a podcast where my guests and I talk about all things recovery. We largely focus on unpacking the issues that cause addiction and how it affects us, but also on the solution. So that includes the 12 steps, all kinds of books, all kinds of ideas and teachings that contribute to long-term recovery. The goal really is to break the stigma of addiction and offer hope of recovery to those still suffering. Today's episode is with Haley Mortensen, the owner of SoberIsSexy.com. It's an edgy clothing line that celebrates recovery and having fun. And having sex, I would assume. Haley was kind enough to share what it was like being a working model, traveling all over the world and getting swept up in the fast-paced life of drugs and alcohol. Now, at over 8 years of sobriety, she shares the magical highs and the bittersweet lows on her journey of recovery. We had a little challenge with the audio, so I apologize for that. However, Haley's message of love and service shines right through. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Haley. Haley, thank you so much for joining me on the ODAT Chat podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I look forward to talking with you.
Yeah, so I thought you would be a great person to talk to. I came across your website, SoberIsSexy.com, on, I think it was Instagram, and I reached out and we've been chatting, and I thought you would be a great guest. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it. It's exciting, and I love podcasts in general.
Oh, nice.
I do. I think they're amazing. And I love owning Sober is Sexy, and it's so fun that you follow me on Instagram and that you have a girlfriend who purchased my bracelets. It's so cool.
Yeah, I think we even must have like a group photo with all of our bracelets on. So yeah, that's super cool.
Oh my God, you should send it in and I'll post it on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We'll do that.
I would totally love that.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit before we started. We're going to cover some things. I'm dying to hear your story. I know you've been sober for nearly 9 years, but maybe you can just give me a couple little details. Like, where are you in the world right now?
As in the world is in...
I'm in... So I'm in San Jose, and where are you today?
I'm in Pacific Palisades, just near Malibu.
Oh, beautiful. I bet the weather is nice out there by Malibu.
It's gorgeous. It's been super hot, but we can't complain.
I know.
It's lovely being near the water.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
So what I thought we would do is just sort of talk a little bit about your history, how you got sober, and then we'll talk a little bit about, Sober is Sexy and sort of some of the things that are going on in your life today. So tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, I came from a small town called Chilliwack, just outside of Vancouver, BC. Mother and father and a brother who we adopted when he was 8 days old. He's 6 years younger than me. It was a great family in a lot of ways. There was a lot of love. I had a grandmother who was a Pentecostal holy roller, and she sort of was the rock of our family. I had cousins, and it was a lot of fun. We did a lot of amazing things together. I rode horses. That's how I sort of dealt with things in my life, is I would ride and I would show horses. And my father had the same disease as me. He was an alcoholic, which really ran in our family. So that was a really difficult thing to deal with growing up, and something that really nobody had the tools to understand. So there was a lot of fear in that way. And my mother didn't drink, but there was a little bit of abuse, and
A little bit of abuse from your dad?
Yeah, there was just a bit of not physical as much as verbal, but the abuse was around alcoholism. And, if you look at any family who suffers from alcoholism, you'll most likely see that there is some verbal abuse going on. And it's really difficult for families, even though I'm an alcoholic. I went through a lot of my alcoholism never thinking that anything I did was really hurting anyone else. And when I got sober, I realized that it was affecting my entire family. And I think my dad felt the same way growing up. It was his issue. He wasn't affecting us. And, but, there were scars left there. And I think I hid a lot of what I was feeling through humor and sarcasm and always being the class clown, never really letting anybody in, starting to lie at an early age, not about things that, just about things about my family, because I never wanted anyone to think that my dad had an issue. And so I think from early on, I carried a lot of shame, and I think I carried that shame right up through my life. And I today are very close. We're very dear friends. He got sober later in my life, and it changed. It was a deal changer, and I just thank God for that. So it was a beautiful childhood, and it was a dark childhood. It was a beautiful mess.
Well, it sounds like you're
That's
able
what
to.
I would call it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're able to, appreciate the good things, and but it's it's tough when one of your parents is drinking. It's interesting that your mom, she just never drank.
No, she never drank. My mom wasn't interested in alcohol or drugs. That wasn't her thing. And I think she was born with a slight liver dysfunction, and she always stayed away from alcohol. And she was very healthy and just a beautiful, kind, loving woman. And, in the end, my mom ended up passing away. But in the end, my dad and her fell madly in love again in their 80s. And
they were in their 80s?
I don't know. It was incredible. They were in their 80s, and they had been apart for many, many years. They separated when I was 17, and they both went on to have other relationships, and life went on, and we grew up, and, I got married, and my brother got married, and they always came to see us together, so my kids never knew that my parents were separated. But in the end, they ended up miraculously living in the same building together by the water on Falls Creek in Vancouver. And my dad started caring for my mom and helping take care of her. She was starting to deteriorate, and they fell in love, and it was beautiful. I mean, she would surprise him with things and buy him gifts, and he would bring her food and cook for her every night. And it was a miracle to actually watch love grow like that. It was truly a miracle, and I feel so blessed to have been part of that.
That's an amazing story for them to be separated for so long and then come back together in the end. That's really sweet.
I know. And had my dad not been sober, he could have missed it all.
Right, absolutely.
And that's what's so beautiful.
So
you got to have that gift with her.
Yeah. But can we backtrack for just a second? So you were 17 when your parents separated?
I was.
Okay. And so you were in high school, right, when that happened?
Well, actually, I dropped out of high school to start a modeling career. I ended up going in the face of the 80s with Eileen Ford.
Wow,
and I took
the
opportunity. Yeah, so it was fantastic. And that, brought me to Toronto. After Face of the 80s, I moved to Toronto. I became a cover model there, became the top model in Canada, and had a huge career that really sort of changed my life in a miraculous way. And then I moved to New York City. So I lived in Toronto, then I lived in Paris, and then I moved to New York. And that's when I signed with Eileen Ford. So it was pretty exciting and pretty fast.
Yeah, that sounds like it would have been a lot of fun.
yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was also, I think stopping high school before I graduated was another thing that always bothered me. But on the other hand, I couldn't wait to get out of that small town and find out what life was about. And I think I really got an education being in the world and traveling all over the world. I've been to Africa, Japan, and anywhere you can imagine, in Brazil. And it was just these relationships that I had with these people. And they weren't very long relationships, but they were sort of meaningful. And I've got to really get into people's minds and sort of have these quick trips with these deep relationships. It was interesting.
Oh, I bet.
But yeah, wow. I loved it.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. It sounds like you met lots of amazing people, and certainly traveling the world.
I did, and I also met a lot of people with a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And I also saw a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol. I mean, it was in the 80s, the 80s and 90s, and it was, it was a crazy time.
Are drugs part of your story?
Yeah, drugs are definitely a part of my story.
Yeah. How old were you when you started drinking and using?
Well, what's interesting is, my family, like I told you, my grandmother was Pentecostal, so I didn't really get started on that train for a long time. However, when I was 18 and I had moved away from my hometown, I was introduced to cocaine. I started dealing with I started actually living with someone who did cocaine as part of his recreation. And he asked me to try it. And after I tried it, I did it for a year straight, every day.
Wow.
I became very highly addicted to it. Yeah, and I had this incredible career happening, and I was using cocaine all through my work and at nighttime to go out with people. It just became a part of my medicine.
Right.
And when I couldn't take it anymore, I remember I called my mom and I said, I think I have a problem. And talk about a geographic. She came and we left the next day to Paris, and we got out of my problem. And for some reason, I was able to put down the drug and not touch it again. And I don't know why that was, but I was able to do that. And I thought, well, I guess I don't have a problem with drugs and alcohol, because clearly I can do this on my own, which was the cunning and baffling part of my disease.
Sure.
So yeah. So then when I got married and my life was moving forward, I started to dabble in, marijuana and alcohol, but it was all sort of under control. It was all, I would say, controlled drinking and using until I got divorced. And that was the first time I took a drink to actually escape how I felt. And that's when my disease took off. So it was almost just waiting there doing push-ups. And when I was ready to finally numb out, my disease jumped on.
Then that's when you lost the ability to choose whether you were going to do it or not.
That's when I lost the ability. Yeah. Well, and it's a progressive disease, so I didn't see it at first. At first it was like, I'm so sad, my marriage is over. Then it was, well, I'm dating, so I really need to feel sexy and beautiful. And it was used as a serum for everything in my life. And so I wasn't aware that no matter what was going on in my life, that became the solution.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun with problems, and then it's just problems. And so it was a lot of fun for a long time. It did mask a lot of things. It did let me feel like I could get through anything. Because I think, when you get sober and you take the drugs and the alcohol away, you're left with yourself. And then you wonder, what was it that made me need drugs and alcohol? It's an obsession of the mind, of course, and it's a disease. But there's a reason why I needed it to cover what was going on underneath. And at the time, I just wasn't aware of that, and I didn't know what was happening. And so as time went on, my disease progressed, and my relationships would fail. And I would drink more because I would be sad, or something great would happen in my life, and I would drink more, and I would take more marijuana to sober up enough to drink more alcohol. And all along I have these two beautiful kids, and I'm not present enough for them to really see the gift in my life, because I'm now chasing drugs and alcohol so that I can just feel okay about who I am. And so I have these two children, and I have financial security, and I have all of the things that anybody would want, but I'm empty inside. Mm-hmm. And so what happened is, as my life went on, I ended a relationship in a blackout. I moved to the Hollywood Hills, and I was living there. And on Christmas Eve, I had a home invasion. And someone broke into my home and tried to kill me. Yeah.
Are you serious? Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was very intense. And for some reason, that's why I believe in a higher power, and that's why I believe in a God. That very day, I was trying to get sober on my own. And I wasn't introduced to any programs of any sort. I just knew that my drinking was bringing me down. And I tried getting sober, and my kids were gone that day. My family was coming in from Canada the next day. There I am in the house. I'm asleep. A predator comes into my home, kicks down my French doors, comes up into my room and starts kicking down my master bedroom door. I have to jump off of my roof, and which was many feet down with bare feet. I shattered my feet, all the metatarsals in my feet, my right arm, and my ankles, and I got up and ran for my life.
Wow.
And it was a life-changing experience. But the one thing I know is when I got to my neighbor's place, when I got to the door and I knocked on the door and they opened up the door, their door was full of blood. There was blood everywhere because I was bleeding. All the skin was off the bottom of my feet. My right arm was bleeding. And the first thing I said to my neighbor was, "Do you have something to drink?" And at that moment, I think I admitted to myself in my shock that I couldn't, words can't describe, when a light goes off that you finally realize, my God, I've almost died, and that's the first thing I need. And it was my, again, my solution. But that's when my disease completely took off. All of my family and my friends co-signed my bullshit. They were like, she needs to drink and do drugs. This horrible thing has happened to her. I was in casts. I was in a wheelchair. I had to learn to walk again. Then I moved from that place, and so many things happened. It was an interesting time in my life. But when I look back on what happened to me, and I look back at the home invasion, they were never able to catch the predator. But today I can say thank you, because without that happening to me, I never would have hit my bottom, or perhaps I wouldn't have hit it as quickly as I did, because he revved up my disease to full tilt. And so by the time I moved into my next home, a girlfriend came and asked me to give her a cake, and I went to that meeting drunk, and that was the last drink I ever had. So it's interesting, God has a plan, and it's interesting how things happen in your life, and you look back in retrospect, and you just are full of gratitude, for such a horrendous thing.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's very intense, and it rocked my world. And I put barbed wire up around that house. I had cameras. I had a German Shepherd. I walked around with a panic button around my neck. I had a joint in one hand, vodka in the other. I had Xanax, and I would patrol my house. And what was so interesting in the metaphor that was my life was the fact that I was the prisoner, and the key was on the inside. And I didn't know that, so I'm looking to the outside again for, please don't hurt me, and full of fear. And all I knew that I needed to do was really face everything and recover instead of fuck everything and run. And my whole life was about fuck everything and run, you know? And it's really fascinating, you know, when you can start to really understand what makes you tick. And it took that to sort of bring me to my knees and start to peel away the onion, start to really be able to see who I am as a person, as a human being. What value can I bring to the world, you know? And that it all just comes from love and service.
Right. No, that's amazing.
You know, and that's what I got offered to me. Yeah.
So you went to that, your friend's meeting. Did you get sober by going to meetings?
I got sober that very day.
Wow.
Yeah. I walked into that meeting and I felt like there was some kind of a spiritual shift. You know, there all of a sudden, it was a women's meeting. I only went to women's meetings for the first 2 years of my sobriety, and it was a women's meeting. And I highly recommend for anyone who is out there who is getting sober and is a woman to really lean into the women, and because I think to be able to share on an authentic level, it's so much more comforting to be around women instead of a mixed meeting where you're sort of talking more on a general level.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked into that meeting. I heard women share like I've never heard truth spoken in my life. I was able to identify. I took the similarities and left the differences. I was able to go home that day from that meeting, and I took a phone list with me, and I just started calling women down the list. And a lady picked up, and her name was Cindy. And I said, "Hi, Cindy, I'm Haley, and I'm an alcoholic, and I don't know what to do. And I'm sitting in a chair, and I'm frozen." And she said to me, "You know, did you have something to eat yet today?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, go and eat, and then call me back." And my whole day was like that. Go walk your dogs and call me. Take a shower and call me. You know, let's read the big book together. And she tucked me in that night. It was her and I crawled into my bed. My son was there in the same room as me because I was building a home in Brentwood. And we were living in a tiny guest house. So he was a part of my sobriety. He was a part of me getting sober. I shared that with him in the same room. And he was 14, I think, 14 or 15.
Oh, wow.
And he would look at me and he would be like, "Mom, are you okay?" And I'd be shaking and I was sweating and I kept changing my bed sheets. And I said, yeah, no, I'm going to be okay. You know, and I just will always be so grateful to that woman, Cindy, who I bump into occasionally. And I always say to her, "Thank you for saving my life," you know. And it was beautiful, you know, and it's just beautiful what these women do. And my friend Jody is the one who is my Eskimo, and she brought me in to that first meeting, and I'll never forget that. And she made sobriety fun.
You said she was your Eskimo? What does that mean?
She was the person that brings you in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. And she brought me into the meeting, and she has also been a fun friend in sobriety. I took my first trip to the south of France with her and another friend of ours, and I was 6 months sober. I hadn't been on a plane sober. I couldn't remember the last time I was on a plane sober, and I flew to the south of France. I was there for the film festival. We ended up doing a documentary called Cam Without a Plan, and shooting it while we were there and having the most incredible time. And it was, I turned to her and I said, "How am I going to have sex sober?" And she said, "Well, so," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're right." And I remember I ran back to the hotel and I bought the domain soberisexy.com.
Oh.
And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but this is going to change people's lives. This is going to be something that I stand behind. And that's how I came up with Sober is Sexy.
That is so great. How long ago was that?
I know.
That was like 9 years ago?
That was, it was like eight years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've been sober 8.5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I kept the domain name. Yeah, that's when I bought the domain, and I thought, what am I going to do with that name? Am I going to make a coffee table book? Is it going to be photographs? What is it going to be? And that's when I started thinking about doing something to pay it forward, and also doing something that was creative. But yeah, so I went to the south of France. I came back. I just started doing things in sobriety. I started living my life again because, as you know, with drugs and alcohol, your life becomes so small. I'm living in this huge house, but I'm locked up in my bathroom drinking vodka and not wanting my children to know. And it's all the secrets and the lies. And it took my son 2 years to forgive me. When I got sober, and all I could do was every day show up and make a living amends to him every single day. My daughter and I bonded right away over it, and we were able to move through it. But my son, it took him time. And in the end, he ended up writing his college essay about what it was like having a mom who was an alcoholic and how it affected his life, and how then, with me getting sober, how it changed his life. And so he ended up going to an amazing college and getting accepted through other colleges as well by telling his truth and by talking about something that I think is really breaking the stigma around addiction, which I think, it's really easy to talk about when you live in a place like California where, it's almost cool to be sober.
Yeah.
But, you go into other places in the world and people are afraid to say they have a problem. And I think the more we keep breaking and shattering that and allowing people to feel safe enough to talk about what's really happening, that's how we're going to see change in the world. As much as addiction is rampant right now and alcoholism, on the other side of it is this great force and this great light that is being shed on this situation. I always think of people in prisons, and I think, how many people are in prison because they killed someone on a cocaine psychosis, or, what people have done, and the disease was never looked at. How many people could we save?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not, if someone told me tomorrow I had cancer, I would go and get chemotherapy and fight for my life. When someone tells you you're an alcoholic, and you can change it if you abstain from it one day at a time, that's kind of amazing. But so many people can't do it, unless they have the support of others. It's a we program. It's not an I. I could never have done this without the help of people around me.
Oh, absolutely.
It's bigger than me. So
it sounds like your son has really accepted your addiction and now your recovery. Did you ever talk to him about drinking and using when he was younger, or what is his outlook on drugs and alcohol now that he has a parent that is sober? Has he ever drank, or does he ever?
Yeah, that's a good question. My kids, both of my kids, my daughter struggled a little bit with other things in her life. She ended up writing a book and had girls all over the world following her because she was so honest about her struggles, not only in addiction, but other things that went on in her teenage years. Mm-hmm. And so her and I were able to talk and relate with each other on a woman-to-woman basis, even though, we had our different journeys with it. But my son, I was able to talk to him that it ran in our family genetically, and I was able to tell him and expose him to enough about what that looked like. But on the other hand, I didn't want to run his life or push something onto him. So I said, if you ever have any questions, I'm always here, and that I love you so much, and I trust that you'll make good decisions. And there was a moment in college when he was drinking, and he overdrank one night, and he was with friends, and he grabbed a bottle off of someone's table, and he got punched in the face in a very severe way and was rushed to emergency. And for some reason, it punched some sense into him, I guess is all I can say,
Mm-hmm.
that he immediately said, I get it. I understand that if you abuse something, then things happen in your life. And he said, I have too much to live for, and he's a really smart boy, and he's straight A student on the dean's list, is just that guy who's going places in life. But he had to have something happen, and it could have been worse. I know parents whose kids have gone through horrible situations in college. But that was his coming to Jesus moment, so to speak, where he looked at it differently, and he said, wow, I get it, and where he saw my struggles. I think I didn't have to preach to my son. The one thing I do know is anytime you start telling someone what to do, you lose them.
Absolutely.
The only way that I could talk to my kids, and for them to hear me is by telling them stories about me, about keeping it about me, and about telling them how things changed for me and the things that I noticed in me when it was getting worse. And when I stuck to that, he was able to listen, and thank God he's not, an alcoholic or a drug addict. He was able to, so far, he's doing really well in the world and is really happy. And it just, as a mother, there's nothing better than to see your kids thrive. And my daughter as well is doing amazingly well. And she's able to really tap in and talk about her feelings. And I think it's so great, you come from different generations. My generation, parents didn't say, I'm sorry. They didn't say, what's on your mind? What are you feeling? And this generation is, what's going on? How are you feeling? I'm sorry if you feel that way. What can I do? It's a different lingo. It's just a different way of talking. But then I think on the other hand, in this era, then you also have that millennial issue, which is, it's such a world full of unintimacy at the same time, and having to look a certain way and having to be, I look at all of these girls on Instagram and everybody looks the same and everyone is trying to be the same. So there's not a lot of individuality. And I don't know, it's an interesting time for kids. That's sort of why I started Sober is Sexy, is because I sort of wanted to shatter the goody two-shoes image of sobriety and make it sort of edgy and dark and cool, so that kids could relate to it as something cool and rock and roll and edgy, but it had a positive message. So, and that came from my kids.
Yeah, I really get that, from reading your blog and stuff. It really has a spiritual message.
Yeah, I think, and everything in my life is a spiritual message for me, because I can't stay sober unless I have something greater than me making that happen. And what I heard one day is someone said, we all have our own God. All we have to know is that we're not it.
Right.
And that really resonated with me, because I thought that's absolutely true. It's, I'm here because of something greater than me. And what a gift it is to always know that whatever that presence is, for whoever it is, whatever you want your higher power to be, that's always with you. That never leaves, and that's something that I rely on in my life in such an incredible, intense way, because I find that when I'm running the show and I'm writing the script and I'm directing it and starring in it, things just never go my way. But when I can let go, right, and I can surrender to a power greater than me, somehow or other, things work out. And normally better than I could have imagined,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I definitely believe it's a spiritual program.
So let me ask you, you grew up in the church and you had a strong sense of God. When during your drinking and using period, how did you reconcile your relationship with God? Did you just put it out of your mind, or did you just like not think about it? How did
When I
you?
was drinking and using?
Yeah, because it's you grew up in the church, you grew up with an idea of God, but when when we're using, listen, I grew up in the
Hmm.
church too, right? And when I was drinking and using, I consciously gave up at some point. I was like, look, I can't be good, so I'm just going to be good at being bad, and I put God on the shelf, and I
Hmm.
was like, I've got this from here. Like I just totally gave up. So when I came back, I had to learn to reconnect. So did you have a similar experience of needing to find a way to reconnect that made sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the God that I had in my mind growing up is very different from the God I have today.
Mm,
And I also think that the God in my mind when I was younger was the man in the clouds coming down in the white robe, and you're going to hell if you don't do what you need to do. And so in a way, that God was sort of full of guilt and full of shame. And so when I had to shut that off, when I started drinking and using, I had to shut that down because I never wanted to feel that way. And when you start drinking and using, a light goes out inside of you. And I think it makes it easier for you to block that out when it's in the dark. And when the light came on again many years later, my God became a loving, forgiving, kind, beautiful God. It became part of the universe to me. It became something that I could really tap into. It was a very different thing. It wasn't about heaven and hell. It was about kindness and love. It was about what can I do to help that person? What can I do to be the best person I can be today? How can I be of service to this person? So it became less about, oh, if I do that, then I'm going to get punished. There was no punishment. Yeah, very different, and also being older in life and not still looking at things when I first got sober through a childlike sense. But when you're an actual child, your sense of God is very different, And I think for me, it's more about spirituality than it is about a religion.
right.
So I
Yeah.
would say that spirituality is more my religion
Right.
today.
Yeah. No, that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. No, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
let's
definitely.
transition a little bit. You mentioned that you had a really, listen, I can't imagine what it would be like, but you mentioned you lost your mom. Do you want to tell me a little bit about,
Mm-hmm.
like what happened for you and how you were able to stay sober through that?
Yeah, I lost my mom in March and of this year, and I was very close to my mom, but she was starting to deteriorate over the years, the last year especially, and I was flying up to Canada all the time and just showing up and being of service to my mom and to my dad. My dad was taking on quite a bit of it because he was there with her, and I could see that he was getting exhausted, and it was hard. It was really hard. There was something I was telling someone the other day, and it's that your parents are your parents and you love your parents. But somehow when you put a mom or a dad in front of it, there becomes an unintimacy to it. And what I realized through the process of losing my mom is I was able to also lose that veil of sort of separateness that always sort of protected me from the pain of not having my mother there. I was able to, had I been drinking and using, let's put it this way, had I been drinking and using, my mom's death would have been all about me.
Oh,
But instead, I was able to show up as a sober woman. I was able to show up for my mom. I was able to move into the hospital for 2 weeks. I was able to make decisions for my mom out of a clear place.
mm-hmm.
I was able to take my mom from so much pain and agony, and her disease was just ravaging her body. So I was able to take her through that, to show up for her, to go all the way through to her slipping into a coma, to also being able to have that magical experience where I was able to talk her to the other side and watch her take her last breath. So it was it's the closest I've ever felt to God. It's the closest I've ever felt to my mother. It put us both as equals. You know, I was able to run my hands through her hair, to talk about her life, to take her on her journey, to allow her to feel safe enough to cross over. And you can literally feel the pull in the room of the person wanting to stay out of fear, but then understanding that on the other side there's something really beautiful, you know, and she was ready to go there, but not wanting to leave me or her family. And so the last words I said to my mom were, "It's okay, I want you to go," you know. And so to be able to give someone the permission to leave this material world is kind of cool, you know.
Yeah, no,
Like,
that's beautiful.
I was sitting in the room. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And I was sitting there with my best friend, who I've known since the day I was born. It was her and I in the room and my mom, and we just looked at each other after my mom took her last breath, and we just started to cry. And it was such an overwhelming feeling because there were so many feelings going on. And I just thought to myself, the first thing I thought when my mom took her last breath is, thank God I'm sober.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No. It sounds like such a precious moment that you had with your mom.
Oh,
You had the
beautiful.
love and support of your
Just
friend.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank God you were
Just
sober.
incredible. And you don't get to have that. Unless you're sober, you just don't get to have that. It would have been all about me. I would have been in the hallway crying. I would have been calling all my friends. I would have been telling everybody what an awful thing I'm going through, you know, instead of realizing, oh my God, I get to go through this. I get to be here.
Yeah.
It's just...
It reminds me of the promises, you know, the promise that self-seeking will slip away. You know, and what a gift.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what a gift that
Yeah.
it happened for you so that you could be there for your mom and experience that magical moment with her and be there for her as she needed you. That's, you know, it's amazing.
Oh my God, it was amazing. And to experience God,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that was the closest I've ever felt, like, to that higher power, to that thing that is, you can't see it, but you know it's there.
Absolutely.
You know, and it was almost like being able to touch it. You know, you could feel it in my mom. You know, you could feel that finally she was at peace. And it was so godlike because my friend and I had gone to lunch that day. The doctors finally said, you need to leave the hospital, you need to get some food, and you can come back. And I said, well, what if my mom needs me or passes? And they said, no, her body's warm, she's okay, she's resting, she's comfortable. So we went and had lunch, and my mom wore a really obscure perfume that not a lot of people wear. And my friend and I were eating, and there was no one in the restaurant. And I got up, and I walked over to get something. And when I walked over, I went through her perfume smell.
Oh, wow.
And my friend she said, oh my God, it's your mom's perfume. And I said, yeah, we got to go. My mom's going to pass. And we ran back to the hospital, and the nurses were like, no, she's fine. And I said, no, she's ready. And that's when we started the journey. And I came beside her bed, and I took down the bar, and I'm like, okay, Mom, I'm here. I get it. You're ready. And it's just like those types of things, you can't make that up. You know, it's just like, it's too powerful.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
And isn't it?
Yeah.
It just makes you just realize that it's just insignificant. Like, there's so much more out there. Like, life is just so, if you stay open to all of it, there are no coincidences, you know?
Yeah.
Everything happens. Everything is a divine, you know?
Yeah.
And I think when you keep your mind open to all of it, it's just, then life becomes exciting.
It does. You know? Yeah, absolutely. You know, because it's like we have an idea of what our life should be like, but God always has a better plan for us.
Oh my God, yeah. And to be open to all of it, I think it's just, It's so cool. Every single person you meet in your life brings something to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
And
amazing.
yeah, you were mentioning to me earlier that, in your life today, you're learning lessons about, not only relationships from your family, but, in love relationships, that you're learning more about yourself today. And, you mentioned recovery is like an onion. There's layers and you get deeper and deeper and learn more things about yourself. And we were talking about looking inward in relationship. And maybe you can just share with me a little bit about what that means to you.
I think that, relationships, to me, in sobriety, it's finance romance. It's always,
One of
there's always
those.
that struggle. And, right? And I think with romance, when I was drinking and using, it was always about the other person. If they could only do this, if they could only be like that, if they were only just a little less. And so I was always unsatisfied because I never felt like anything was enough. They had a lot of money, but they weren't connected to who they were, or they didn't have this, but they had, there was always something lacking. But what I realized the longer I stay sober is that I'm the common denominator in that. And so unless I change who I am, unless I'm able to really look at myself and really change my core belief, I think, I grew up with my father. We had a tumultuous relationship. So therefore, I pick men and all the ones he was trying to, or I, it's loving the women who love them. It's all of those books that I've read, all of the self-help and all of the things where I feel like I have all of this knowledge. But really, at the end of the day, it's just showing up and being kind and listening and understanding someone. And, I can only be responsible for how I react to something. I can't control another person. And I really get that. I mean, the Serenity Prayer is all about that, and for me, I go inward and really look and take my own inventory. I can't take everybody's inventory that I'm in a relationship with. I'm only responsible for mine. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work with someone, then you can walk away and say, you know what? It's okay, because I did the best I could do in that relationship. But I have to say, in my past relationships, I think I basically would sabotage. And I'm not saying all those relationships were my ideal man. All I'm saying is I didn't get to see that one way or another because of my behavior. And so once you get sober and you've had some time, then you get to really look at your behavior. And it's not easy to look at yourself. It's not
No,
easy
it's not.
No, it's difficult. And that's why a lot of people just keep going, well, I can't do that, or that person's not enough, or, you know what, he just doesn't get it, or, whatever it is, the angle, because it is all, the running line through all of that is fear.
Right.
Fear of intimacy, fear of taking my mask off, fear of the fact that you won't love me if you really knew who I was. All of those things that I think you build up over time, and it's having to discard a lot of that. Someone was talking to me the other day, and they said AA for them stands for accept and adjust. And I really
like
love that, because it is really about, what's that?
I really like that. That's great.
Yeah, it's great. And it really is all about that. It's about accepting a situation and adjusting, and there is no perfect relationship, and what I think is that unless you're able to look at yourself and change those things within you and work on them, those are all in the steps. And I mean, character defects, they never go away. It's like a daily reprieve, I just get to wake up and be kind and loving. I get to wake up and want to help the person I'm with, be the best person they can be. And when I do that and I'm not looking for something, because most of the time when I get in a situation in a relationship is because I have an agenda. You're not meeting my agenda. You're not doing what I need you to do to make me happy. Once again, outside issues. And so when I can finally turn that around and just be of service, it's interesting. I can be an amazing friend, an amazing mom, an amazing daughter, an amazing sister. That's where my struggle lies. And that's what I work on. Is how do I, there's something to be said for what's historical is, what makes you hysterical is historical. And
good.
So I really think about that, because I think when I start getting worked up and crazy, this is stuff that's happened to me in the past that I haven't let go of.
Right.
And and it's just all of these things. It just takes time,
It does, yeah.
It's it's a process, But all I know is that love never fails me. Whenever I come from love, everything works out. Whenever I come from fear, it creates more fear. And so I get to make choices.
Yeah.
I choose to come from that loving place.
I love that line,
Yeah.
love never fails me. So we're coming up on our time here. And usually the way I wrap up the podcast is we talk about, it's called ODAT Chat, which stands for One Day at a Time. So maybe you can just kind of walk me through your process for staying sober, one day at a time. Do you have a daily routine? Do you have a weekly routine?
Oh, yeah, I love that. I love how you're ending it. Everyone does in their life to stay sober. Well, I do. When I wake up, the first thing I do is I start with a gratitude list because I wake up most of the time in fear. Things that are never going to happen.
Right.
I'm terrified about things that probably will never happen. I do a gratitude list. And I also have spontaneous. And once I turn my phone on, so I'm seeing what they're grateful for, I'm writing down what I'm grateful for. And then I pray, and then
yeah, so I lost you at, you and your sponsees do gratitude lists together?
Yeah, we do a gratitude list, and they all write in. So in the morning when I wake up, all of their lists flood in, and I get to see what they're grateful for. I get to write back about what I'm grateful for. I pray in the morning. I get up. I have my coffee. I've started meditating more. I go on and off of meditating, but when I'm meditating, my life is better.
Yeah.
Whenever I can do that, that just centers me for the day. I also do breath work every week with someone called Jean-Paul Crimi. He's a breath work teacher, and I go to his classes on Monday nights when I can, and I breathe and I let things go and I let things come in, and it's very soothing. It's like doing an intense therapy class in an hour. Basically it's prayer, it's meditation, it's calling other people and asking them how they are, because I find that when I'm left to solely focus on me, it's never a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
When I can get out of the hamster wheel of the me show, I'm much better off when I start helping others.
Mm-hmm. I love
because
that.
Otherwise, it's, how does that affect me? How does that affect me? Oh, well, how does that affect me? Everything becomes me. And I think that's alcoholism,
Yeah.
At its core. And so whenever I can get outside of myself, it's a good day. And then as the time goes and I have my cup of coffee, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, you know what? The day looks quite nice. It's going to be a good day. I think I can tackle the day. But it's, first thing in the morning there's an hour there where I do everything I can and everything shifts. And that's all stuff.
Yeah, no, I love that. That sounds
so
That sounds amazing. Well, good. Well,
Yeah.
listen.
So that's it. And just
Yeah, no, that sounds.
go ahead.
Yeah, that sounds great. I do something very similar, and it's amazing. If I can get the prayer and meditation in first thing, how my day goes totally different.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, we're so lucky. I mean, it's just really using the tools. It's really, when they say it works if you work it, there's a reason why they say that.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, I mean, it's all there. It's all there. I mean, Bill and Bob wrote it. It's right there in the first 164 pages of the big book. Right.
People that haven't read the big book, people that haven't done the steps, are missing out on some of the coolest literature that's out there in the world today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we're super lucky. So
yeah. Well, listen, I wanted to be sure that people have a way of getting in contact with you. I would encourage everyone to go to soberissexy.com and check out. You have a great blog and you have a great e-commerce site on there with some really cool, fun, edgy stuff. I absolutely love it. And do you want to give out maybe your Instagram handle or maybe ways people can get in contact with you?
Yeah, Instagram is at Sober is Sexy, and anyone can contact me through my personal email at Haley Mordison. I'm always available to help others, and it's HaleyMordison@gmail.com. Or they can find me at Radical Self is my own Instagram, which I keep a separate one, and then I also run at Sober is Sexy, and you can DM me on there. And I'm always here to be of service, and I'm always here to help other people. And I would love you to check out my site, and also new blogs are coming and sort of expanding to YouTube in the near future.
Oh,
and
fun.
Just different exciting things. Yeah, we're sort of just starting to take off again and expand the company. So I'm very excited and I'm very grateful. And I really appreciate doing the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for being a guest, Haley. I really appreciate it. You have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Okay.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.